Bam! What is going on, folks? MC is in the house. A little technical difficulty. Apologies for the late start, but we seem to be good to go. All right, I see viewers jumping on now. So for those of you that are watching this for the first time, my name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and this is the Warrior Stream. I am here every Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time for about an hour, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, where I usually just take a topic and dive in. And Caceres, what's up, brother man? Good to see you. And I'm currently streaming right now on YouTube, a couple of Facebook pages, and I think Twitter. Sean, what's going on? Good afternoon to you. So a couple of people had commented in the past. I don't see those comments where you're getting them from. Well, sometimes on the platform that I use, somebody's on YouTube and I share a Facebook comment or vice versa, something to that effect. I don't know how much interaction or engagement the Twitter interface allows, but people are watching it in different platforms. So what's up, Corey? Big Dog Alpha in the house. What's going on, brother man? Aaron, hello, darling, up in Canada. Good to see you. All right. A lot of the regulars are here, which is good. Plus some extras, which is always good to see. To that, like, subscribe, all that stuff. I'm playing the game like anybody else. Sometimes I invest a little bit more in it than others. And I think I'm going to be responsible today and remind everybody to please like and subscribe to the channel, etc. Cherrytown Vibe says, yo, MC, yesterday's email hit different. Much appreciated. I don't remember what email I sent yesterday, but you're welcome. But keeping me on mission, which I like. If you guys have not yet signed up for my email list, I send a free email list every day. You go to masterchim.com. Not only can you put your email in there to get access to my emails, but I'll also give you a free balance management program called Master the 24-Hour Cycle just for doing so. But go to masterchim.com and you'll see the information there. All right, who else is here? Alan, good to see you. Jamie, the other part of Aaron up in Canada, holding it down. Good to see you, brother. Hope all is well. Big Fred, round 2. Fred's in my mastermind group, so we were interacting earlier today. Good to see him still on mission. Big Frank the killer. Only a coward runs from independence. That was the email. Thank you for that reminder. And yes, I had a good time writing it. I'll say, my emails, they're always going to pertain to topics that I speak on, either in tribe, in my tribe, or with my coaching students or martial arts students. Not always business oriented, and sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes, not so much, because business is something that I inspire you guys to start, entering into. And entrepreneurship, I think, is one of the most independent-minded routes a man could take. And there are a lot of different paths to get there. And some of them start with, hey, I'm going to stick with this job until I got this other thing going to the point where I can leave it. And so be it, But I think, when we are sort of aiming our trajectory in one direction, not getting fired from our job for the next 20 years is not a very high goal to set, right? So all that being said, all right. Sean writes, recently realized you have a gym in Westchester County. I'm in Harrison, we'll have to see. Absolutely. Stop by Jungle Gym New Rock, right? Newer show there. Tell White Boy Pat and Goose I said what up. Big Jack. Good to see you, Jack. Right on. All right. Aaron says, the I'm getting rid of this word email was awesome. Challenge accepted. Right. So for this month, I like to have an internal challenge that I run, for myself every month. A lot of them I share with the email list. And this month, last month, it was 20,000 steps a day, which I crushed. This month It is the removal of a word from my vocabulary. The word is the opposite of fortunately, right? And every time I say that, or if anybody catches me saying it, maybe I don't even realize I say it, I have to do 10 squats. Not a big punishment, but it's a ritual that builds an association, bringing something that's been programmed subconsciously into the conscious mind, so we could take a little bit more accountability over it and sort of deprogram, that out of our vocabulary. So for me, with that particular word, it represents what I would say is a dysfunctional relationship with reality, and it disincentivizes the discovery and development of formulas. By saying, like, here's this thing that shouldn't be there, or even like to get so weak as to say, this isn't fair, it's down that rabbit hole of weakness. So I would just as soon nip it in the bud, right? So that's what that is about. Aaron says, I'm wanting to start working out again, considering how much I've noticed myself using this word. This could be great. And I'll tell you, everybody should stop saying the word or stop using the word to express themselves and their positions on things for all the reasons I just mentioned. But some people just, as we say in the Bronx, just ain't about that life, and either do it or you don't. And it's no more complicated than that, and that's what I usually tell people. It's like, well, do it. No, but it's going to be this. All right, then don't do it. No, but then do it. Then don't do it. Like, shut the fuck up about it already. Either do it or don't, right? Should have got off the pot. A lot of different ways to say this. All right. Sean says, the fortunately mindset has been huge for me. Great email. Right on. I appreciate the feedback. Derek, what's going on, brother, man? Good to see you. It all comes down to mindset. In the 3-road system, I start off designing the individual's identity. And a component of that is, like, what are the frameworks that you're using to sort of process, or the lens that you're using to process your surroundings? How do you orient yourself in where you see yourself as being right now, where you aspire to be, and what that path looks like in between? Like, there are things that we need to train ourselves for in life. And mindset is where that begins, right? Mindset is literally your mind's settings, like settings on a monitor or settings on a video game, or it's like, what are the settings of our mind, and how do those settings interpret our interaction with our world? And is it productive, unproductive, or somewhere in between? So it's really, nobody has to be perfect. I'm sure as shit not perfect, far from it, but it's like I'm still working every day to get closer to it, right? Which, perfection is the removal or the complete elimination of flaw, right? And that's how I define perfection. So trying to be perfect is a very, moral and noble goal, because we are not so arrogant as to think that we're ever going to reach it. Certainly not as arrogant as to say that we are already there, but I couldn't think of something more valuable for an individual to pursue than the perennial removal of flaw, right? Jan Saxa, good to see you, Dawn, right? So today, what are we talking about today? All alliances end. All alliances end. There's a saying by a business guru, I'll use that word, mentor, master, whatever, named Dan Kennedy. And if you guys are in business, if you're entrepreneurs, you've certainly heard of Dan Kennedy. If you're an entrepreneur and you haven't heard of Dan Kennedy, like, you're fucking up. I guess I just fixed that for you, right? But he has a saying. He has a lot of good sayings. One of them, pertaining to what we're talking about today, is they all go lame, right? So Johnny Groove, good to see you, bro. So Dan Kennedy's saying is they all go lame. And the context in which he's using it is as a business owner. He's talking about employees. He's talking about customers or clients. But basically, through my lens, it's really, he's talking about alliances, and he's talking about, like, where do the alliances go? I've expressed alliances in many different ways, trying to build a sort of comprehensive model that people can understand and thereby control and anticipate. But the easiest way to describe the the life of an alliance, I would use an arc, right? An arc, and I'll do it opposite so it looks the proper direction on your screen, right? So an arc, it's like you begin, you have the initial establishment, energy's high in an alliance, and then you peak in the function of the alliance. And at some point, just because each individual member of an alliance is moving in their own direction, there's just a natural expectation of offset, right? And eventually we just, we've used a phrase before, you guys are familiar. We've grown apart, right? We've grown apart. And that is what this is addressing. This is this idea that, if an individual is pursuing their goals and trying to become as strong as they could possibly be, therefore, thereby making themselves more valuable to the allies they have, then one would expect an inevitable move in a direction that cannot maintain the overlap that was there in the onset of the alliance, right? So they all go lame. If somebody is going to get a job, my oldest son just got a job in Chili's, the fast food or slow food. I don't know if it's a fast food, but whatever, the Chili's restaurant, chain. And he's a bus boy. So, he's running around with the plates and trays and all this stuff. And as soon as the manager hires him, he understands that there is a time where he will either fire my son or my son will quit. He knows that that is inevitable when he hires him. So to think that one shouldn't be hired unless there's the full understanding and expectation that this is going to last forever, it's just dysfunctional. It wouldn't even make sense in just as simple an example as the one I just gave. Well, of course, my son's not going to work there forever. And it's not a mystery to the manager. It's not a mystery to the owner, to the coworkers. Like, everybody understands, like, this is this stage of his story, right? And alliances, have a lot of those same sort of dynamics where there is a mutually beneficial discovery that culminates in the establishment of an alliance, creating that synergy. There's a reason why I'm this. There's a reason why you're in this. And so long as we're getting that reason fulfilled for each one of us, we're going to continue to invest. There's a point where, if an individual is not upholding their end of the alliance, therefore the synergy is not being created, the alliance will dissipate. Well, sometimes, like I just mentioned before, just the natural evolution of an identity has them just grow in a direction that can no longer maintain that connection. I used the job example just now with my son. I could also use the example of maybe childhood friends that we had, right? Before we matured and developed, our relationship with the real world and, started a family, whatnot. There are maybe people that we grew up with that we no longer really connect with. And we don't have any interaction with them anymore. Whereas at one point in our lives, like, they were a daily, addition to our experience. It was the kid next door or the classmate, whatever the case was. So this, again, there's many different examples of how this plays itself out. So Dan Kennedy, when he says they all go lame, he puts a little spice on it with his word usage. But the only thing he's really adding to the dynamic that I just described is you should sort of not only expect the alliance to end at some point, but you should almost like not expect this guy to be the perfect, partner in this engagement, such that he or she is going to defy, this expiration date, right? One of the alliance codes, respect the expiration date. Like, this thing that we all know in life that occurs. Don't just fall in love with the prospect of this one ally defying the odds. And Dan Kennedy is a, very realistic, pragmatic, a mentor when it comes to business. And his whole thing is like, listen, like, this guy's going to leave one day. Like, don't forget why you're here. Don't forget what it is that you're doing. Right. So all alliances end. Now, I remember when I first started, going to Dan Kennedy events, and I was part of, one of his mastermind groups for a while. And I was, I connected with a lot of smart people, and I got to be, privy to a lot of just masterful conversations and discussions about different aspects of business. And I like to think I sort of cut my teeth on a lot of those, conversations and things that I did in those circles. But they all go lame was always a partial sentiment to me, right? So I had added at some point, they all go lame unless there is another option. Now, when I first started saying that, I hadn't really codified a lot of what eventually became the TRIBALNOMICS book and the system, and that system now being part of 3 Roads, which is even a bigger system. And like, it was just me expressing sentiments on an individual basis. I didn't create a system where they all fit together at that point. And my whole thing is that they all go lame unless there's another option. One of the things that I held as proof that there needed to be something beyond that was marriage, right? My parents were married over 40 years before my father passed. My grandparents, 75 years before my grandfather passed. Like, there's something to be said for, well, they don't always go lame. And I wasn't comfortable with saying they all go lame except marriage, because a lot of marriages go lame too. So the way that I see it, and the way that I started to decipher what my relationship with this was going to be, was really through the lens of that offset and overlap, relationship. So what does this mean? This means that when we have an ally, understand that when you first connect with an ally, a lot of it is, you just connecting in a way where you get something out of it. And it doesn't matter if it is a business, alliance, or if it's you giving money to a bum on the corner. You're getting something out of it, and that is why you're doing it. You run into a problem, assuming, of course, that what you're getting out, is more than what you're dishing out, or the return on investment is a positive one, right? I should say. There's a point where you're going to make a mistake if you think this is supposed to last forever. If we know that individual identities are changing every day, every moment in their day, every beat in time, they're interacting with their environment, and this process of evolving who they are, like, that changes over time. I don't think that at the core people change, but I think, as far as we could tell, they do, because they're in a constant process of evolving the way they perform being them, right? In TRIBALNOMICS, I use the verb selfing. Like, when somebody's doing the things that they do, they are in the process of selfing, right? And I think we're always going to be privy, or we're always going to really deal with other identities in terms of how we observe that selfing, display that they show us. And where that's concerned, it's always going to change over time. At what rate, to what capacity? Like, yeah, that might change from individual to individual, but you could expect change over time. It's just one of these constants. So that being said, we know that the alliances are going to change also. So in alliance codes, I started talking about how we build a bridge, right? There are certain things that in that program I described, like, listen, if you know these people aren't going to be around forever, you can anticipate, if you're paying attention, and this is something that you'll get better at. For me, like in the school, sometimes there'll be some sort of anomalous behavior in a student, and I'll point out to the other instructors, I give them 6 months, 3 months, a month, whatever it is, because you start seeing that offset and you start seeing it moving in a direction. And I know the capacity of the systems of the school to sort of alter that direction he's moving in. Like, we're not strong enough to change that. That's beyond the scope of our relationship. So it's just a matter of time before he's gone. So you can learn to anticipate that. And what winds up happening when you realize that it is inevitable, right? Or that should be realized right from jump, but you start to see the sort of countdown, I guess you could say, it's a way to put it. There should be a process that you engage in whereby you are looking to establish what will be the new alliance after this one expires, right? So if a relationship, and again, I'm going to do a reverse, so it looks right on your screen. If there's an arc to a relationship, right? An alliance, there's this arc, right? You initiate it. It culminates at the peak of the alliance's productivity and synergy. Then, as offset begins to increase over time, the strength and the synergy of the alliance, goes down as well. Till eventually, there's no more synergy in that alliance. The alliance dissipates. Well, before we hit that sort of rock bottom, right? And I'll use the screen, right? So this is the bottom, right? So we start here, right? And there's that arc, and it's going to end where there's no alliance. If right here we could begin another alliance, what winds up happening is you have a relationship, and before it dies, you are starting another relationship. So as this one continues to go down, this one goes up, and then you have another arc. And you could overlap these arcs. And it's how individuals maintain a productive, functional alliance despite the two of them evolving to selfing rituals that are completely disconnected from the original ones that were present at the alliance's onset, right? So I hope this is making sense. So the idea of it is, it's like, your alliance at the current level it is not going to last forever. Now, in marriage terms, and the dynamic of a man and wife, which is what marriage is, by the way. I've been married over 19 years. My wife and I, our relationship, the first 2 years and these last 2 years, it happened between four completely different people. Who she was, who I was when we got married, who we are now, like completely different people. How we interact, completely different. There are children now, right? There weren't children in the beginning, right? Like we live in Pennsylvania. I can go down a list of all the things that are surface level different, but the core of who we are as individuals, we're into different things. When I first got married, I thought my whole life was going to be running a jiu-jitsu school. I thought that's what it was going to be. That's as far as I could see. So it's like, oh, this is it. And any ambitions that I felt, as a business owner, it was still, I was biased. And there was this ceiling, this imaginary ceiling. Well, of course, any success I have in business moving forward needs to come through the jiu-jitsu school because I don't know anything outside of jiu-jitsu. So there was a bias that led to conclusions that obviously should have been looked at as foolish or almost metaphorical conclusions, because of course I wouldn't know how everything would evolve in my life over time, and there's always going to be a limit to how much you can anticipate that. So I think the value of it is just understanding that change is coming and being prepared to do it, right? So what am I connected to? I'm connected to my morality. I'm connected to my identity that exists outside of these interactions, which is why it's so important to sort of figure out and continue to work on who you are, what I call the self-alliance in the book. When that is squared away, that is that orienting value that you could sort of hold on to or find when you're lost. And you could hold on to it when life's getting rough. You could find it when you're lost. Like, it is the thing that reminds you who you are. How we go about doing that while interacting with the outside world, like I said before, is going to change. We're okay accepting change so long as we understand who we are. The problem is when people don't have an established identity, they build alliances that make up and compensate that gap in their identity that they had not done the work to develop. In other words, they build a codependence with certain values and variables in their ecosystem. And should those things be removed, they feel as if a component of their identity is removed. So they actually fight against change. Well, not a productive thing to do. Why? Because change, like I said before, is inevitable. It's why it's so important to know who you are. I talk about state a lot, right? Like one's emotional state, energy state. There's a bunch of different ways to express it. But the idea is, am I in a state that is weighed down by these stories that are going on in my head that are taking up the bandwidth, the limited bandwidth that I have, that bandwidth being needed for navigating my ecosystem, the landscape of my life. Like, I need all of my faculties and capabilities to best, most productively and powerfully navigate my life. But if I have all these stories going on in my head, less of my bandwidth is available, right? So being in a good state is almost having a clean slate. I didn't even mean to rhyme right there, right? So if you're somebody who has no control over their identity, a part of that is not understanding how to manage your state. You conflate, confuse, reduce the idea of a productive state to being happy or being in a good mood. And that is not what that is. Being in a good state is certainly having energy, but it's energy that comes from having the full use of your bandwidth without any of the baggage of the stories, right? I've told the story before. It's probably a video on my channel if you look for it, called Imaginary Lions, right? And this idea that we have stress responses to stories in our head, right? The way that an animal is supposed to have a stress response and the sympathetic nervous system activating in response to a legitimate threat in the real world. We're now so smart, we're stupid, as my father used to say. And how does that work itself out? Because we create these imaginary lines. We have these stress responses. We have this baggage. The people who are, I'm going through a depression. Clinical depression's a real thing. Like, first of all, the idea that something's real, like it's just like it's such a waste of time. Is this a real thing? It's like, who the fuck knows? I once had my daughter, when she was 4 years old, come out to me. She was in the bedroom. She came out, "Daddy, there's a monster under my bed." Was I supposed to tell her that monsters aren't real? That's what most people would do. But they would do it because that's the only tool they got in their fucking toolbox. "Darling, monsters aren't real." As if the 4-year-old is supposed to go, "Oh, I didn't know. My bad." As she, hops back, skips back to bed. Like, no. I said, "There's a monster under your bed." "I don't think there is, but let me see. I'll go in with you. Come on, let me check. Did you see where he was? Did you hear him?" "No." "Well, you know what? If it's a monster, it might be a good monster. If it's a monster. Because there's only good monsters around here. I made sure of it. That's what we wouldn't live here. We wouldn't have bought this house if there were bad monsters around. So I think you're going to be good." And I already told them, they already know not to come and bother you when you're sleeping because they know how important sleep. Like, this is what I'm saying to my 4-year-old, right? So this idea that we're supposed to be perfect and everything's supposed to be real and you should never lie to your children. It's like, whoever told you that is like literally lying as they're saying it. They might believe it, but it still don't make it true, right? As we interact with people, our state, the better job we do at keeping it light, the more consistent we could be in who we are presenting ourselves to be. The more consistent we are in the presentation of our identity, the stronger an alliance is going to be because there is a reliability on who we are. They can build an alliance that is as customized as possible given the stability of who we are. And you have a greater depth of the alliance that creates more synergy. But if you're somebody who is funny on Monday, sad on Tuesday, angry on Wednesday, confused on Thursday, tired on Friday, exactly how deeply is somebody supposed to invest in an alliance with you? It's like, because there's just by that list that I just shared, there's 5 different yous. Which one is the alliance? It's when you have the boss. And a lot of the leadership information that I deal with a lot of business owners and how to manage, their employees. I ask them, like, when you're in a bad mood, how does that affect your leadership style? And it's like, do your employees know when you're in a bad mood? And like, is if the bad mood is created, because listen, we all get in fucking bad moods. I'll let you know if I ever get that down completely. Not there, by the way. I've done a shit ton of work, but it's like the people that work for me, it is not, and I say deserve in the context of we have an alliance, right? Deserve has to do with fairness, which can only exist in an agreed upon alliance, like rules of a game or something like that, right? So they do not deserve different versions of me, because different versions of me is not reflected in our relationship. So if I'm in a bad mood and go in there in a bad mood, like I'm literally somebody else that is telling them what to do than the guy I was yesterday. And all that'll happen is the ability for them to build an alliance with me just gets more and more shallow, right? So let me catch up on some comments here. Johnny Groups has probably got every Dan Kennedy book. Right on. I've owned probably everyone at some point. I give books away. Danny, what's up, brother, man? Good to see you. Haven't been able to catch live in a while. I've known Danny for a lot of years. Hope you're well. Aaron, Selfing, yep. Derek, what's up, my man? Good to see you. Cherrytown Vibe says, MC, is this why you need to spend time alone and away from the aquarium when it comes to finding your true identity? Well, yes, it is. The short answer is yes. I don't think it's completely necessary in terms of like spending time away from the aquarium is literally just disconnecting from the engagement of the identities that are in the aquarium. I live in the Pennsylvania mountains, right? People live in the West. They call them the hills of Pennsylvania, but they're fucking mountains to me, right? So I live in the mountains. I go on hikes. I got a hike planned later on this afternoon, a 12-mile hike, and I'm looking forward to. It'll be me and my trekking poles in the woods, right? And it's going to be hot. There might be a thunderstorm later. I fucking love it. My feet are going to be fucking killing me. I'm going to be listening to animals, seeing things, running through the wood. Like, it's going to be incredible. That is one of the things that I do to disconnect from the aquarium. But what it is a meditative ritual. And it's meditation that we all need in some form. So I define meditation as a ritual that sort of disconnects and wipes away all the cobwebs of those stories that we can't seem to get out of our minds. Some people have more formal, ritualized meditation sessions. I do a meditation session every morning. Sometimes I switch it up a lot. Right now, lately, I've been doing this 10-minute guided meditation, and it's one of these things that it almost, it's so long as I'm getting the cobweb, job done, what form we're using almost doesn't matter. Some people, where they're at, they need to sort of fill, it's sort of like, I'm going to use the bandwidth analogy for a second, right? If we have 100% of our bandwidth and there's a bunch of stories, almost like files on a computer, right? That slows the computer down. Let's say that 25%, a quarter of our bandwidth are these stories, and we need to get rid of the stories. Some people can meditate and it'll let go of those stories. Some people, they do some form of moving meditation, which, to use the bandwidth metaphor, they need to replace that 25% with something else, almost discarding it as a result. So they need to engage something that by default disengages the other things. It's like, how do you get a baby to let go of something? You hand them something else, and they'll drop that. And it's like, that is how some people need to let go of stuff. And it's a process. Some people need to sort of replace the bandwidth with something else in order to discard that. Some people can go through a purely mental meditative session and process and do the job just the same. Doesn't matter, so long as the cobwebs are disconnected, because after we disconnect all those cobwebs, you're left having a conversation with you, right? And the identity, the voice in your head, the consciousness. There's a lot of different frameworks that people have used to describe this. But I think functionally, how you describe it doesn't matter. It's really just making sure that you are not identifying yourself. Because here's the thing. If I say you disconnect these cobwebs and you're left with you, well, the people who are unaware of this process, they think they are connected to that. Who they are is including that, the things that are, sabotaging or dirtying up their bandwidth. Like they think that's part of who they are. And, it's like when somebody's worried about, paying the rent. Oh man, I don't know how I'm gonna pay the rent. I'm gonna pay the rent. Now, mind you, a little motivation, a little fear-induced motivation is useful, in certain applications, but there's a certain point where it's like, well, what is it that you can do to pay the rent? I have to work 10-hour shifts every day, or I'm not going to have the money. Can you work 10-hour shifts every day from here to the end of the month? Yes. So what's the fucking worry about? Like, well, as soon as that's resolved, it's like, what's the worry about? But here's the thing, that's an easier pill to accept. The other one, though, a little bit more difficult is, well, if you work as much as possible, are you going to have the money at the end of the month? And they say no. Then I go, so what are you worried about? Because no matter if you try your best, you're still not going to pay it. Like that's the reality of it. But the whole thing is we still need to retain that state. Remember, one of my sayings is there's never reason to not be in a good mood. Only the weak mind and suffering to circumstance. The good mood is a little tongue in cheek in that application because there is this whole, logic behind what I mean with the bandwidth and a good state and everything. But if I say good mood, that's enough utility for the average person listening to it. But to give you guys the inside scoop, it goes beyond that. It's really, do you have a way by which you can clear your bandwidth? So talking about people who are depressed and, oh, I'm going through a depression, like, well, stop. It's like, just stop. And to me, it's like, it's you telling me, all the dishes are dirty in the sink. Yeah, fucking every dish I have is dirty. And I want to eat, but I don't have any clean dishes, and there's dirty, moldy food on all the dishes I have. It's like, well, clean the dishes, and it's easy for you to say, oh, your dishes are clean. It's like, well, what the fuck does one thing have to do with the other? Well, this is the clarity, and I do have conversations with people like this for effect. Obviously, I lead them through these. I get that energy up because they get frustrated, and then I use that energy to direct them to a little bit of movement that makes sense. To me, it's, well, I want you to go to the gym and have one of these workouts where, like you are a fucking corpse at the end of it. Not literally, right? But you are just done at the end of it. And I want you to tell me how you feel, and I use another example. Like, why do you think cold therapy, ice baths and the showers, why do you think that's such a popular ritual? Like, who would have fucking thought 10, 20, 30 years ago that one day they'd be selling $5,000, $7,000, $10,000 tubs that make cold water, right? Well, here's the thing. Try to maintain those stories when you're in, a 40-degree Fahrenheit tub of cold water. Like, you can't do those things at the same time, which is why it is such an effective ritual, because it completely erases anything that's in your bandwidth, right? It cleans your cache, right? Or your cache. I don't know how you fucking say it. It's a computer reference. You know what I mean? So getting back to these alliances, how do you think that it's ever going to last, this alliance that you have? Because this is another mistake that people make, whereby they're working on themselves. They're investing in themselves. If you're listening to me right now, like, I'm not talking about the fucking sports. I'm not talking about, the latest gadget or gizmo. I talk about things that reflect the types of pressure that I put myself through and the things I've learned from it. But if you're somebody who is investing in themselves to get more clarity, to become stronger, to build, more, whatever it is, you're climbing your ladder, most generally put. You're climbing your ladder. It would be a mistake to assume that everybody you're connected to is also climbing their ladder. When I'm with my group of brothers, right, my tribe, all we talk about is how to make ourselves stronger, how to make our family stronger, the things that we've learned, like things that are relevant to all of our climb up our respective ladders of self-power. How we can make the tribe stronger is a component of that. Like, these are the discussions that me and my brothers have. If you're surrounded by people who, after doing all this work, you have a conversation with somebody who's in your life regularly, and all they want to talk about is how tired they are, or, oh yeah, I can't believe it's raining today. It was supposed to be sunny. And like, listen, as much as I'm trying not to put a value judgment, obviously you could tell my utter disgust for those types of conversations. But the point is, it doesn't matter. The point is, it's just incompatible if you are on your ladder. They're going to stay where they are. If you continue to evolve, you might see it as you're climbing this way, and they might see it as you're going this way because you're becoming a worse friend, right? But this or that, it doesn't even fucking matter. All I'm saying is you have to acknowledge that at least this is happening, right? And if you look at my overlap offset image in the book, the Venn diagram with the two circles, it's like those circles are spreading apart, and eventually there's no more overlap. Well, alliances exist in the overlap. If there's no more overlap, you have literally nothing in common with this person. So there is no investment for the two of you to mutually make that's going to produce any form of synergy, right? So that being said, we need to anticipate that there are certain alliances that we have now that as we grow are not going to be sustained, or at least not by our doing, right? If we're continuing to grow and continuing to get more powerful, there are some people who are just going to stay where they are. And like climbing a ladder and somebody's not climbing, there's a certain point where you can't see down that far anymore. The problem with trying to maintain that is you're trying to climb while looking down. How effective a climber are you going to be? So my take on it is just understand they're welcome to climb. You could tell them, hey, I'm going that way. I hope you join me. And all of that's real and sincere and authentic. But there's a certain point, if you're climbing and they are not, you can't even judge them because they're following their path. It would be tyrannical to do so. Fucking loser, doesn't want to fucking read. He doesn't want to do this. Like, first of all, like, he's winning in whatever game he's playing, but don't assume that he should be playing your game. Right? So there's some discipline to be had in this because believe me, I was the benevolent tyrant. I was the guy who was everybody in my life. I'm going to help you the way I'm going to help you, whether you fucking like it or not, because it's best for you. I know it's best, says the tyrant, right? I've been there, done that. You get to a certain point where it's like, and this is the fortunate way the universe works. When you allow them to uninterruptedly be themselves, and you continue to climb your ladder, you are more than likely giving them the best help you could give them. You know how long it took me to understand that Sting song? If you love somebody, set them free. I've been setting motherfuckers free like a maniac this last decade. It's like, oh, here, little birdie, go fly, go fly, go fly, right? Because there's a certain point where it's like it's not even fair within the scope of our alliance to expect them to keep up with me. And I don't even say that like there. I just mean as I move, I can't expect them to move with me. There's a certain point in the jungle gym, my martial arts school, where I made it mandatory. Like everybody's going to spar. Gloves like on the ground. Not everybody's do stand-up striking, but like jiu-jitsu, gloves, like everybody's got to do it. And there's a certain point where a bunch of people like left. And some people, I give them the credit, some people came to me and were like, yeah, I don't want to do that. And what the fuck was I supposed to say to them? Oh, well, stop being a bitch. Stop being this. Like, they're going to leave either way. Right? So understanding, right? Another one of the sayings, don't populate the other side of the battlefield. If this guy's leaving either way, you probably shouldn't make him an enemy just because of the whole battlefield thing I just said. But more, wise or more powerful perspective to have is, who am I to tell him what he should want in the first place? Right? So if he's going to go and do his thing, I have to let him do that. Now, how is that the best way to help him? Because the alternative would be to force my help on him, which changes the dynamic of the help completely. It's trying to give a bum money. Hey, can you spare a couple of dollars? I shit you not, I was at a Dollar General, I think it's called, a couple of miles from my house yesterday. I'm not used to seeing bums, where I live. But this guy looked like a fucking meth head, That's like white crackheads, right? You just assume they're meth heads. Right? If there were any shade of brown to be a crackhead, I'd say, but even in my head, I use meth head. Whatever. The dude was a fucking druggie. And he was a big, like, imposing guy. Not that he was trying to, flex on anybody, but just a big dude. And I get out of my car. Excuse me, sir. I'm just trying to get some help. And he's going on his thing, And at some point, I go, What do you want? And he goes, I was just wondering if you can give me a couple hours. No, get the fuck away from me. So he's like, all right. So he moves away. And to me, it's like, if I give him $5, I'm helping him. Who the fuck? I'm probably making him uncomfortable doing this is always going to be more help than giving him a couple dollars, right? So that much closer to the next fucking pipe full, whatever the fuck they measure that shit by, So when we want to help somebody, we have to understand there is such an allure to be tyrannical, right? My mother used to use a phrase describing me when I was a kid: strong and wrong, because I was the most stubborn motherfucker around. But I was also a stupid, inexperienced kid who thought he knew everything. And I would stick to my gun. Nope, this is what I'm saying. This is what I think. And strong and wrong, right? Because at some point my mother would just like, all right, you could be over there, fucking being wrong, I guess, I guess you win though. All right, over there being wrong. You won the losing contest. There's a certain point where we just have to understand, because we think it's right for them does not make it right for them. Another phrase I've used, your best idea, and this is more general, not limited to this, but a general thing. Your best idea could still be a bad idea. It could be your best idea, could still be a bad idea, right? And we have to allow for that, right? And it's so fun. We had we had Independence Day yesterday, and I wrote something, about it, and you guys were talking about the email and stuff. And my thing is, one of the things I've raised my kids with this conversation being a common one, the thing that separates, Western civilization, America, from history or non-Western civilization type countries is the codified protection of the individual. Right? Like, what separates us from some of these other countries where everybody says they're happier, but how the fuck would they know? It's like you ask a 3-year-old, do you want grilled chicken, a salad, and broccoli for dinner, or do you want a fucking ice cream sandwich? And they're gonna say, oh, the ice cream sandwich, and then I give them one meal, you give them the ice cream sandwich, and then you interview the fucking 3-year-old. Which one are you happier with? Like, it's like some of these happiness polls. It's like, but who the fuck? How the fuck do they know what the fuck is going on? Like, what the fuck does happiness have to do with anything, right? So liberty, freedom, these things that are a huge, core component of who I am and what I believe in. Like, Western civilization managed to codify that for the first time. They managed to say, nope, this isn't just a, majority wins and the individual is to be ignored in the face of the majority. Like, no, like, the individual has rights too, and we're going to protect them. When we look at how we interact with people, there is a tendency to want to help them, but we have to resist any of that help that includes us making decisions that they should be making as their own independent, autonomous identity. Now, here's the thing. Like my kids, climbing trees and stuff. I let them climb trees. You know, my whole thing is I won't allow my kid to do anything that he'll die doing, right? So anything that's dangerous, it's like, yep, have at it. Because it's going to be at a kid's level of consequence, right? It's like, oh, I want to run across the street. Like, no, you fucking idiot. You're not running across the street. The car will fucking kill you. Look at all the dead deer, you know? When I'm looking to like, how am I looking to raise my children when this is concerned, is to build them. I want my kids to have their own identities. I want them to have their own beliefs. I don't ever, you know, unless it's dysfunctionally offset with our culture, our tribe, like I don't mock the disparity or the offsets in their beliefs to my own or to each other's, right? I understand my children don't want to, you know, read Nietzsche, lift weights, and go hiking all day like I do. You know, I understand that. They're not lesser people for not wanting to do that. Like they have their own things, but some things like kids got to learn how to fight. It's family business, you know, and they're coming along nicely. Kids got to lift weights, right? The kids have to read. You know, kids, there's certain things that are non-negotiable, but that is raising them to be overlapped and be able to connect with the culture of the tribe. So even though I am raising their identity to be as strong as possible, there are some components of that, what I'm exposing them to where they can always comfortably, functionally overlap with the tribe. All right, I once had a student of mine who said he wanted to adopt Chinese kids. He wasn't Chinese. And I asked him, I'm like, you're going to adopt Chinese kids? Like, how the fuck are you going to help him or him or her? Like, how are you going to teach them how to be Chinese? And he said, well, it's not my job to teach them how to be Chinese. It's my job to love them, to educate them, to, you know, blah, 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 blah. So my whole thing was, so the fact that they're going to walk around with that face for their life, the fact that they're from that culture that is impressive and established, you're just going to take that away from them? You're just going to ignore that part of who you are? He didn't like that. Right? He didn't like that. He thought he had me when I said he teach them how to be Chinese. You know, I'm not as stupid as I look. And my whole thing is, like, he didn't understand, or he didn't want to accept. He understood it after a while in our conversation. He didn't want to accept that he was reducing the potential identity of that child. Like, listen, I'm not saying that the child wouldn't be productive, loved, happy, capable. Like, listen, all of those things are possible. Don't I hope I'm misstating my position here. But to separate a child, like, by the way, like, you're walking around with a Chinese ass face, like, people can expect you to be connected to a Chinese identity in some way, right? And like, there's no, you know, value judgment in one culture or the other when it comes to this component of overlap and compatibility. Like, this is just like, of course. I remember my father at one point, right? My father, born and raised in Puerto Rico, came here when he was a teenager, learned English here, right? And there was a point where he wanted basically me and my younger brother to be Puerto Rican, for lack of a more articulate way to put it. And I understand his motivations. I understand part of his legacy, but there was a certain point where it was just too late. And he would say, you know, well, you're Puerto Rican. And I would say, no, I'm not. I'm saying, you're Puerto Rican. He didn't enjoy these conversations. But there was always a point to it, right? I've been an asshole my whole life, by the way, yes. And I would say, you're Puerto Rican. I'm not Puerto Rican. I'm American. And he'd say, no, I'm from Puerto Rico, so that means you're Puerto Rican. Like, and he knew I was being a pain in the ass. He's been around, you know, my entire life, so he understands who his son is. And he also never liked debating because he would lose patience and he'd want to fucking kill me. And I would be a button pusher, right? Admittedly. And I tell him, I said, Pops, here's the deal. This is how much you wanted me and my brother to be Puerto Rican. You never taught us Spanish, and you married a white girl from Brooklyn. Like, if there is a make a Puerto Rican starters kit, like, you didn't buy it. So there is just a limitation to the expectations we can have when wanting people to connect with one identity or culture over another. So bringing that back in, like, to raising my kids, I am conscious of these things. And at an early stage, there were some things that were non-negotiable, right? Training martial arts, like, they all know how to run a blade. You know, my oldest started doing some shooting. I'm not an SME in firearms, but I'm connected to what I'd say the best firearms instructors on the planet. And their tribal uncles will take that job on when necessary. But, like, there's just certain things that are non-negotiable, because I understand it is going to be a component of who they are at an identity level. And because of that, they're always going to be able to connect with the tribe as a result, because the tribe is going to feel like home to them, right? So what else is here? Sam Stern, what's up, brother, man? All right. Cherrytown, you'll excuse me if I don't read that one comment you left. So Cherrytown Vibe asked, this is the other one. Is it bad that Amy Comey Barrett adopted 2 Haitian kids? She and her husband are white as white gets, though. Here's the thing. Not bad for the Haitian kids by any means. And I would say not bad for Amy. It's like, I don't want to say bad, right? Because it's not the value judgment that we find the value of the observation. Like, the conclusion of these, understanding these dynamics, is not, is this good or bad in some universal sense, right? It's really up to the individual, right? So when you look at what adoption is for the adopted children, and I don't presume to know any more about Haitian adoption than anybody else, but I will operate under some expectations of what I would think it's like for those children. And I would say, going by that presumption, there is it's a step up to get adopted by a future Supreme Court justice. They're doing all right. They're moving on up, so to speak, right? But it's really, well, what are the dynamics at play? What are the variables that are being set at certain settings? Like, what are we gaining? What are we losing? That's what it comes down to. Thomas Sowell, great quote, there's no such thing as a solution to a problem. There's only trade-offs. Everything's a trade-off, right? And, like, what are the trade-offs here? Like, yeah, they're not going to grow up with a Haitian identity. They're not going to speak, I don't know if it's French. Is it French they speak in Haiti, right? They're not going to speak the language. They're not going to understand the culture. If they were to go to Haiti, they would feel like a stranger in a strange land. And they will miss, or they no longer have, therefore they would lose that capability of their identity in terms of connecting with the culture. But nobody said that that's a good or a bad thing, right? That is something for somebody else to sort of decide. Right? I'm just speaking in a universal sense. So is it bad? No, I'm not going to say it's bad. I'm going to say, well, she is certainly not going, her and her husband aren't going to help them become better Haitians, the children. And they'll be raised as Americans, and they'll be raised to ignore race and ethnicity. They'll be encouraged maybe later on in life to try and connect with their Haitian heritage, but as being somebody who's from a mixed heritage, who went to schools in the hood and went to fancy schools that all the rich white kids went to also. Like, one of the things that I noticed is the white kids in the hood try to really fit in and be gangster. The black kids in the affluent neighborhoods, the brown and black kids in the affluent neighborhoods, I would say I'm comfortable saying most of them at some point try to exaggerate the identity component that they've never been exposed to, right? So The Puerto Rican kids get really Puerto Rican. The black kids get really black, in whatever loose, usage of those terms that I'm just using right now. I think the sentiment I'm conveying, enough to you guys listening. So it's like, why is that? Because they want to be part of that. A black kid grows up with all rich white kids. Like, there's a part of him that he knows he's different from them. Right. And we're not at a stage in society where there is no longer that difference being perceived. Right. And there are just differences that exist in ways that people don't even realize it. Right. Like, I'm not going to go down the list, but you guys understand. Right. It's fucking distracting. That's how I get the video banned. I start getting down that rabbit hole. So point being, it's not about right and wrong where these settings are concerned. It's about just understanding the causal relationship we have with those things that are in our control. When it comes to alliances, and I'll conclude with this, we're at the hour mark now. If you do not modify the rituals that create the synergy of the alliance will end. And it's natural for it to end. And I think you would be better off anticipating that and building a bridge. If there's no way that the alliance could be modified to maintain the current level of synergy, then you need to upgrade or downgrade that alliance to reflect the amount of synergy it could potentially produce and go there. Like I have friends that I used to see every day growing up. And now every once in a while, we send each other a text or a social media message, and that's where our alliance is right now. Whereas one point in my life, every day we were hanging out, and I think ultimately understanding these dynamics is what I'm all about, right? It's what my material is about. All right. So we'll stop it there. I appreciate you guys for watching. If you guys have not yet signed up for the emails, go to masterchim.com, put your email in. I don't share emails. I don't do all these things. Like, if you are on my email list, it's because your email was put in one of my opt-in forms. There is never going to be another list that you are on from me. Like, I fucking hate when people do that with my emails. I will certainly never do it with yours. All that being said, it's free. You should do it. A lot of power. All right. I appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys next week. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.